America. My name is Osei-Frimpong, and you're watching the second episode of the Black Athenians. Now, we have a studio audience here, so there are going to be questions after this, after my brief presentation. And the theme of today's presentation, now gather around, children. The theme of this presentation is going to be terrorism, white terrorism of Black Athens. But as I've been saying since the beginning, if we can fix these problems in Athens, if we can get Black people political and economic power in Athens, we can do it in Macon, we can do it in Savannah, we can do it in Columbia, we can do it in Gainesville. All of these, they share Black generational poverty and, honestly, white wealth. There's money in these towns. The problem is in the distribution. And the people have to ask, why is there a problem with the distribution? What's wrong? And usually when this question is asked in Black communities, the answer runs that something wrong with Black people. Like we lack skills, we lack the education, we lack the fortitude, we lack the risk-taking acumen. We buy too many Jordans, or we lack the financial literacy, or we spend too much on hair care. Like all of the excuses all go to one place. They all blame Black people. They all blame Black people. So here's the deal. If you find someone blaming Black people for Black poverty, they're a problem. It might not be their fault, but they're a problem. And because the real cause of Black poverty in these United States, especially Black descendants of slave poverty, if you're a descendant of slaves, which most Black people, especially in the South, are, the cause is not us. So anyone who tries to blame us has been either propagandized to blame us or is trying to deny Black people the appropriate power and justice. So if the problem isn't us, first of all, we have to acknowledge that there is a problem. Matthew, can you put the wolf picture full frame? All right. So what you're looking at right now is median net worth. Median net worth. These are numbers from a wealth economist by the name of Edward Wolff, and that says that the median adjusted household net worth of a white family in these United States is about $100,000. That's if you make a few adjustments for a few durable goods, and then the median Black net worth is about $1,700. Now, median just means that there's as many people above as there are below. And that means if you're in a Black community, the people around you don't have access to a ton of capital. Right? So that's just, that doesn't admit of a class structure. When the median is at 1,700, there just isn't a class structure. There isn't a general amount of money to be to help us when we get a hiccup, if the transmission goes out, or if a tree falls down, or if you just get a little bit hurt, or if you have to miss a day of work and maybe take a few days off. That just isn't the appropriate cushion. So pretty much Black people are broke. So if people say, well, Irony, you're being divisive talking about Black people and talking about white people. No, I'm not being divisive. Math is. There's a difference between $100,000 and $1,700, right? So the question is, why is there a difference? It's tempting to just blame Black people. That's what a lot of money wants to do. And when you ask people why about Black poverty, the first thing they do is usually find a way to blame Black people. But it's not Black people. It's actually white people. I'm going to tell you why. All right, give me the regular camera now. All right. So Black poverty is directly related to white terrorism. When you say Black poverty is directly related to white terrorism, what do you mean? I mean that the descendants of slaves after the Civil War, and we're talking post-slavery, like slavery ended about 150 years ago, but we're going to talk about white terrorism post-slavery and how lucrative it is and how lucrative it was. So after the Civil War, there were freedmen's bureaus. These are Union garrisons posted in little southern towns. So if you're watching in Savannah, if you're watching in Macon, if you're watching in Columbia, if you're watching in, Gainesville, find out if there was a freedmen's bureau in your town. Because these freedmen's bureaus popped up after the Civil War to ensure that Black people were included in the United States economic and political life. Right? So in Athens, the Freedmen's Bureau was on Thomas Street. It's now a little apartment building. Hey, it's now a little apartment building. But it was a Freedmen's Bureau to make sure that black people, it was a Union garrison to make sure black people were actually included. Because if you don't know Southerners, they pretend, they really are attracted to the Southern way of life. And that Southern way of life, prior to the Civil War, was not actually congruent with giving black people the appropriate amount of rights and power that we were due. Right? So the Freedmen's Bureau made sure that the old Confederate veterans after the war treated the black people with due respect. Now, if you can do a little bit of research, I found a few letters from the Freedmen's Bureau from their official correspondences. Matthew, can you put up letter 1? Letter 1. I'm going to just read it, and you can follow along. It should be in the handout for the studio audience. Hey, Matthew, go ahead and put on camera 2. I want to show the people the studio audience. Put on the second camera. Yes. These are all the beautiful people. Hello, America. All right. Now let's do some history. All right. So the Freedmen's Bureau. This is a correspondence from the Freedmen's Bureau. Oh, the feed might have been. The letter might have been on top of the feed. Oh, good. All right, good. So I'm going to start with the sentence, reports have come to me that, in the first letter. Reports have come to me that both white and colored citizens are arming themselves. The whites say the colored citizens are arming themselves to murder all the whites at a certain time not particularly specified. This, as they pretend, has caused them to arm themselves in self-defense. On the other hand, the colored citizens contend that they are desirous of living in peace with the white people and attend to their daily work. That large bodies of armed white citizens are roving through the district of Newtown and New Harmony, now Commerce, in Jackson County, halting and hailing every colored man they see and compelling them with threats of violence and drawn weapons upon them to make them sign certain written articles of agreement, which they term as association of peace between them. Now, the articles are nothing more or less than that they, the colored people, solemnly pledge themselves with an oath that they will vote the Democratic ticket in November 1868. Now, if they sign these, they are let alone with warning. If the colored people violate their pledge, death is their doom, and if they refuse to sign, they are driven out of the county, their lives threatened, and many of them have been driven from their homes. Such are the reports that reach me. All right. So that was an official correspondence to the Freedmen's Bureau about what that sounds like to me. That sounds like Taliban Afghanistan. Like, these are roving armies of armed mobs threatening people, making you sign something for your vote. If that's not terrorism, domestic terrorism, I don't know what is. Can you imagine a roving army of ex-Confederate soldiers saying, if you don't vote this way, we're coming to find you? And just sign right here so we know who you are and your name. So make sure you vote the Democratic ticket. And remember, the Democratic ticket of the 1800s was the ticket of white supremacy in an obvious way. Depending on who you talk to, the Democratic ticket of the 20th century is the ticket of white supremacy, just in an unobvious way. We can go into that in a later session. However, can you imagine a roving army of white militiamen threatening you for your vote? So you can say, like, you're talking about domestic terrorism, you're talking about white terrorism. That's so awful. That's so divisive. I don't know another way to describe what was going on in that letter. Please save me from the roving militia that wants me to sign over my vote. So that sounds like domestic terrorism to me. And this is official correspondence from the Freedmen's Bureau in Athens, Georgia. Now we're going to go to a second correspondence. Can you put up the second correspondence? Letter 2. Oh, good. Is that it? Okay, so I want letter 2 just go into, it's a new file. I'll take over. All right, so we're going to find the second letter, because this one's a lovely little letter about what domestic terrorism could look like Good. All right. So, good. Move it over. All right, so I'm going to read from the second letter. This is when the Freedmen's Bureau was about to leave in the area. This one, I believe, is from Columbus, but I think there are similar letters found in Athens. All right. So, dear sir, we, the undersigned freedmen, have learned that the federal soldiers are soon to be withdrawn from Columbus. Feel constrained most respectfully and request in the name of the Lord to implore you not to leave us unprotected by federal troops. We firmly believe that the Almighty has ordained our freedom, but at the same time, we wish to inform you that if the federal soldiers are withdrawn from us, we will be left in a most gloomy and helpless condition. Now, a number of freedmen have already been killed in this section of the country. And from expressions uttered by, from expressions uttered by prominent men in this community in civil life, we have every reason to fear that others will share a similar fate. We think our commander here might do better than he does, and we do know that there are men here who would protect us if they have the power. We therefore most humbly and earnestly pray you, General, not to leave us to the tender mercy of our enemies unprotected. Signed, Harry Watkins, Abraham Smith, George Blunt, S.W. Love, Morgan Gale, and 120 others. All right, give me the camera. So these are people saying, please do not leave. If you leave us to the mercy of our enemies unprotected. And what happened? The Freedmen's Bureau left. And that is what explains, give me the numbers again, the wolf slide. This is what happens when black people were left unprotected. If you believe, I have no reason to believe that the 124 people who signed this letter, the 124 black people who signed this letter and risked their life, you can take this slide away, were making it up or overstating the case. From then on, they lived in terror. And that's been the story of the United States since. We left these people to the tender mercies of their enemies, and that's why black people are scared today. And you're saying, that was 140 years ago that the Freedmen's Bureau left. It can't be that bad. There's been a booming black middle class. Well, okay. So we're talking in Athens. Now you can go, good news is Athens is a university town, so there are archives. So I went, to the archives and, tried to look at some numbers. But let's look at the index for the archive. Go ahead and put up the Klan archives. Is that the whole thing? Scroll, move it up a little bit. Hold it down. Okay, so we're going to look at that. Good. So if you look at these Klan archives, you'll find out that the Klan was a robust organization in the United States and in Athens. This is from Athens, Georgia. They had internal politics. They had officers. They had a needy relief. They had a help for the needy fund. It was just a regular community organization that happened to sideline terrorizing black people. So this is a fine. It would probably be a 501c3 if the tax designation existed in 1926. So this is the Klan, the everyday Klan, terrorizing black Athens, while also having food drives for the needy and membership meetings and internal politics. These are your lawyers, your judges, your police officers. So that's domestic terrorism. That was 1926. Now you can say, look, irony, that was 1926. That was a long time ago. At the time, Athens was about half black. And, there was a business community. There was a black business community that emerged alongside the Klan. And to be clear, there was a black business community that emerged at the pleasure of the Klan. Now this is a poster from Birmingham. It's not Athens, but I think the message translates. Now this is a Klan poster from Birmingham, and it says, "Negroes beware, do not attend communist meetings." This is when the labor movement. I'm going to do one of these just on why we're a right-to-work state and why the South is a right-to-work area, because like most problems in the South, it's got to do with race, and it deserves its own show. But we're talking about black terrorism right now. So here you go. Negroes beware, do not attend communist meetings. This is when people were unionizing at the time. The Klan is watching you, take heed. We like Negroes here, but not when they demand social equality. All right? So the black business community that did thrive in Athens was only thrived at the pleasure of these terrorist groups. Right? We'll allow black people here, but don't try to be equal. Don't try to have political power. You're allowed here at our pleasure. Right? This is what happened. This is the legacy. You think those 124 people who signed, if you leave us, if you withdraw the federal troops, you will leave us to the tender mercy of our enemies. You think they were joking? You think they were speaking in hyperbole? No, that's not the case. So Black Athens was terrorized, and insofar as it was allowed to grow economically, never politically, but economically, it was always at the discretion of white Athens. For example, there was a black business community up until the 50s, at least. The black business community in Athens, Georgia, and we're going to put another picture of what? There was a black business community in Athens until the 50s, and you would think, well, what happened, Irene? Obviously, we were doing well. There are black businesses, and if you have black businesses, that means you have black power. Yes and no. Because while there was a black business community in Athens, this was the Athens City Council at the time. And would you believe that when that Athens City Council decided that we would rather have an urban renewal in Hot Corner, which was the name of the black business district in town, they took it. They decided, all right, you've had your businesses, now we want the land, and we have designs, we have ideas about what the university can do, and we want that. We pretty much want our land back. We let you rent it, but we want it back now. And what they did, they took it. So that black business district is now not a black business district. It's actually a very lucrative white business district because in the name of urban renewal, that city council took it. Because when you're terrorized out of political power, you're at the whim of that city council, right? So when I talk about I believe in black power, I don't believe in black power. I don't believe in some sort of black hegemony. I believe in black power insofar as black defense from the wiles of that city council. I believe in black power insofar as it's additive power, insofar as we work together as a union so that like we could all be free. So you don't have to worry about us uprising, and we don't have to worry about your terror. That's what black power means. It's not supremacy or anything. It's just an equal share at the table, because left without black power, you get this. And you're saying, well, that was the 50s. That's not Athens today. That terrorism is the 50s. It's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. It was a long time ago. Surely we've progressed by then. Now, there was also a movement to desegregate one of the burger spots in town called the Varsity. Right? There's a movement to desegregate the Varsity. I'm just moving a picture so I can have art of this movement. To desegregate. the varsity because it was a moving time. People were finding their freedom and finding their dignity, and they thought, we're going to desegregate the varsity, which is a burger and hot dog spot in town. I want a burger and I want a hot dog too. So what's going to happen when you desegregate the varsity? Would you believe in 1964 there was a Klan march? So the people on the left side of the screen wanted to desegregate the burger and hot dog spot. The people on the right side of the screen, your civic leaders, we do not know who they are because they wore hoods. But, if the Klan in Athens was like the Klan everywhere else, it was your lawyers, your doctors, your judges, your police officers, who wanted to make sure that the black people were appropriately terrorized out of their spot. So that's what domestic terrorism, and they had an office right downtown, and picture was taken in 1964. All right? And remember, the entire goal of the Klan from the beginning, from their emergence outside of Reconstruction. Remember that first letter about the Freedmen's Bureau. What did the white militia wanted? They wanted to control black political power. They wanted to control black political power. So there's another photo for those people who think, look, you're talking about ancient history. That was a long time ago. It's not as if there is still white control of the Athens political sphere today. To which I say, this is the Athens Planning Commission. Now remember, Athens is about a third black. And the Planning Commission is the commission that does the first negotiation with any land developers about land use policies in Athens. They decide what trails go there, what becomes a park, what becomes a road. This is your Planning Commission in a town that's a third black in 2017. All right? So when people ask black people, why don't you have political and economic power? If the goal of the Klan was to stymie black political economic power and pretty much terrorize black people out of seeking political power, and that's, I think, actually the deeper argument is the culture we're in today is black people do not know how to ask and will not summon the will to demand and contend for political power because of the effects of white supremacy after the Civil War. And so we try to pretend that we don't need government. While everybody else, while Wall Street, the coal industry, the auto industry, they're making their demands on tax dollars, black people say, no, we'll do it ourselves. And we like to say we'll do it ourselves because we're independent, but no, we've been taught to do it ourselves because seeking political power was tantamount to terror. And that's why your first black president, Barack Obama, was very clear to say, no, I don't really care about black political power. There is no black America. There is no white America. There's just the United States of America. And you know what the United States of America looks like? This is what the United States of America looks like when there isn't black political power. And that's why I can do another show on it. Everybody else's net worth grew over the last 8 years except black people. Because America looks like this is your political class, and your first black president needed to show that he understood that America was concerned primarily growing white wealth and growing non-black wealth. All right. So Athens, over the last 8 years, the black poverty rate actually went up. Would you be surprised? The black poverty rate in Athens went up. And it's generational poverty. It's poverty because the parents were terrorized, and their parents were terrorized, and their parents were sharecroppers. So the legacy of white terrorism is such that these people, they wore hoods so that these people don't have to. Right? And that is the legacy of white terrorism in Athens. And what does that affect? That means if there's so much money, like I said, if this works in Athens, it'll work in Mobile, it'll work in Savannah. There's so much money that changes hands concerning rezoning and land deals and land development. We just put up in Athens a $50 million condominium, $30 to $50 million condominium complex next to campus, right? Who's going to be building that condominium complex? That's something that's negotiated, that could be negotiated in the Planning Commission. But would you believe that Planning Commission that I showed you did not think to make sure that the builders were going to use at least 30% because the town is 30%. Would you believe that this Planning Commission did not go out of its way to make sure that 30% of the contractors in this building were going to be black? Now, they did go out of their way to, there's a woman here who I know is an environmental expert because she was there to make sure that like the new land use policies had green space involved. Because when you're in the room, you could actually negotiate interests for your community. She was there to negotiate interests for environmental concerns, and it's a good thing that she was there. I too care about the environment. I also care, and I'll be honest, I primarily care about getting black people middle-class jobs. That means I want black people earning good construction jobs. And if you don't know, good construction job is a good job. That's not $7 at Taco Bell. That's $27. That's $30. A good union plumber or a good plumber, that's good money. Electrician. Those are the kind of jobs I want black Athens taking. And those are the kind of jobs I want black people in Savannah getting. And those are the kind of jobs I want black people in Columbia getting. But if that's the Planning Commission, those are not the kind of jobs we will get. The jobs will go to the developer's cousins. And you know, how do you become a developer? How do you become a developer? The easiest way to become a developer is to have people who have access to money. And if you're black, and that's your network, and this is your network, then your people don't have access to money. Not in the same way. You're not in the game. Look, in a well-ordered world, I'd like to buy a studio in Athens. Because that way I could be completely free, not have to worry about anybody's discretion. As it is, I'm working out renting this studio. And that might be a problem because, you know, I have to deal with businessmen, and businessmen in order to continue their business have to be cozy with the dominant order. And the dominant order might not be concerned with growing a black middle class and the politics that's required to grow a black middle class. So this is one of the problems for doing a black politics when your people don't have access to capital. And the quality of capital we need is capital for political defense. So that when the Planning Commission decides that, you know what, we don't need all of these extra Negroes. 30% is too much. It used to be 50%, now it's 30%. We would like the land. How about we just make it 15% and just start like buying up the land under which they're renting and rent it to college students instead. We pretend that's not going to happen, but that is going to happen, especially with the older generation. And I want to do another show. I have a list of shows, people. By the way, if you like what I'm doing, go ahead and go to thefunkyacademic.com. Can you put my nameplate up there? Yeah, put my name up. Go ahead and go to thefunkyacademic.com. On the right-hand panel, that one's hard to see. Let's do the other one. Yeah, go to thefunkyacademic.com. On the right-hand panel of the website, you'll find a place where you can just kind of kick in a one-time donation for a lot of money, which would be fantastic because I'd like to pay a little bit of rent. I'd like to, you know, make moves. Yes. Or you could pay a little bit of money a month, which would keep this going and keep the lights on. And eventually, the quality of programming I would like to do to build a middle class, a black middle class in Athens, is gonna take a little bit of money. Like I said, I'd like to buy a studio, like $100,000, just buy a studio, because that way I don't have to worry about renting it. So if you know someone with $100,000, write me an email at irami, that's IRAMI, my name, at thefunkyacademic.com, and we'll talk about how you can make a nice donation for the sake of black middle classes all over the United States. Because if we can do it here, we can do it a lot of places. Not everywhere, but I think we can do it in St. Louis. I think like places as big as St. Louis. And we could stop black people from getting kicked out of a St. Louis and into a Ferguson where there aren't services. That's the danger, right? You kick black people out of Athens, they'll end up in Oglethorpe County where there aren't services, there isn't a bus line, where $1,700 does not get you what you need in order to live the way you should live as a person in the United States. So the quality of black political defense we need to stem white terrorism and to reconstitute a black politics that will stand with the militiamen and their descendants as equals is going to take the quality of black political education that I think we can do here. And if we can do it here, we can do it a lot of other places. And you say, black irony, still, terrorism wasn't that long ago, and it wasn't that bad. There were black businesses. And I say that any black business existed at the time at the discretion of the white political class. And that includes black businesses in Athens today. And that's a problem for black self-determination, if you care about black self-determination, which I do. And to be clear, black self-determination isn't black hegemony. It's just black self-determination. That means not having to worry about white feelings in order to do the quality of programming or the quality of political history. Because the story I told just now isn't just a black story. That's an American story that should be told to every Athens, 8th grader. Because that's just history. Like, I'm not trying to create some sort of narrative that says all white people have to be bad. I'm saying that if you don't stop, if there isn't an intervention into black degradation, it will get worse. And black people owe justice for all of the degradation and the anguish that has resulted in such disparities in wealth. And that's not just a wealth disparity. Understand that for the next 30 years, the story of America isn't going to be income. It's going to be wealth, right? The wealth that's passed down. It's not going to be about how much you make in your current job, although that'd be nice, black people. We need good current jobs. But a lot of it's going to concern what's the net worth of the people at your wedding. And black people, the net worth of the people at your wedding, even if they're the fancy black people at your wedding, isn't going to be the net worth of the people at like just a regular white person's wedding. Like that's just like, and that's what capital moves around. So that's what you should look at. Like that's, and I'll say this again, and I'll probably say this every week because it's important. One, our claims are justice claims, not charity claims. So anyone who says, well, ask blank and blank white benefactor for money and maybe they'll give it. That's not going to be justice. We are owed justice. We should be able to demand blank and blank white citizen and our government to make sure that black people get the justice we deserve. One, two, so black claims, black redress isn't a charity claim, it's a justice claim. Two, wealth is not a property of individual. So everyone can say, well, my uncle's got money, so like, I'm fine. No, wealth is not a property of individuals. Wealth is a property of communities. And it's the case right now that if you're black, living around black people, there's not a lot of wealth in your community. You're alienated from wealth in your community. Whereas you can be white and live around a lot of white people and there'll be wealth in the community. And that matters. That matters if there's wealth in your church. That's the difference between having a church that a tree falls down and you can just pass the plate once and get that fixed, and having a church where like deferred maintenance will be hundreds of thousands of dollars and you can keep passing the plate, as black churches are wont to do. We can keep passing the plate. And turns out that all those pennies do not equal dollars, or that one black middle-class family that can't actually give dollars is not going to be, like, even if you're a solid middle-class black family surrounded by poverty, your money is tied up with, like, making sure that your kids are going to do fine, because we'll also happen to be downwardly mobile. Right, there's a study by the Brookings Institute that says 7 out of 10 families that are born in the middle class, born in the black middle class, are going to fall into poverty. So your kids are not going to do as well as you're going to do. And in Athens, that looks a whole lot like when the baby boomers die and the property is handed about to the kids. The kids aren't going to get the money together in order to pay taxes. Something's going to happen, and they're going to end up selling it. And they're going to sell it to people who might not have the black community's interests in mind. So that's going to be the story of how what was a black middle class is going to fall into poverty. And everyone's going to think, oh, that's just my story, and that's just my story. No, it's going to be a whole lot of people's stories. I saw Magnum P.I. on television. I say Magnum P.I. because he's always going to be Magnum to me. Tom Selleck was on television telling old people to sign in for a reverse mortgage. And black people, if you sign up for that reverse mortgage, your kids are not going to see that house because they're not going to be able to get the money together to keep up with the mortgage payments and taxes, and then boom, the wealth is gone. So if anybody comes to you and tells you to sign up for a reverse mortgage, don't do it. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. And now we're going to talk one more story about black terrorism. I'm going to give you there's going to be a quick video of Shirley Sherrod. Now, Shirley Sherrod, you might remember her from Obama's years as the agriculture. She was doing HUD and agriculture at the time. Anyway, some excerpts from an interview she gave were taken out of context. Obama got spooked, fired her, because that's what he did for a while. Remember when he did that with Van Jones? But this is Shirley Sherrod talking about how she got involved in advocating for black people in terms of agriculture. Her father was killed. Her father was killed because of a land dispute with her neighbor. And this is the story of that.
Roundup. He left him there, and then on the morning of March the 14th, 1965, we met him when we were on our way to church. And my father told him, you know, if you come tomorrow, he would get some others to come and help, because they knew this was a problem cow. And but the next morning, when everyone gathered at the pasture, this man started claiming 5 or 6 of our best cows, and my father argued with him. And according to the others, my father said, "We don't have to keep arguing; we'll just go to court." And he was actually going to his truck. The man is still talking. He turned around to say something, and that's when he was shot.
So, struggles over land are throughout your story. Now, your father's killer was never prosecuted.
Never.
What you came to learn after the event was that it did have to do with a dispute over a cow, right?
Yeah, he had.
So, hold on. All right. So, do you understand the import of that story in terms of terrorism? Do you understand that there was a land dispute over a cow in this was Baker County, Georgia. Shirley Sherrod's dad was shot over a land dispute over a cow after he said, "Look, let's just deal with it in court. I don't want to deal with this is my cow. I know it's my cow. Let's just deal with it in court." He was shot. That's what white terrorism looks like. And you better believe, now, I have every reason to believe that the land from the people who shot Shirley Sherrod is still in that family. Right? Because that's what white terrorism was. You think you can buy land here. You think you're a property owner here. But actually, everything you do is at our pleasure. So the land grabs were still backed by white terrorism. The land grabs were still backed by white terrorism, and that's how you account for the. And that's one way. I can do an entirely different show, and I plan to do an entirely different show on government policies that were organized to lock out black people and build white wealth. But the white terrorism is what stymies black people from making the quality of political demands that will get us our redress. And I want to be clear, when you see this wealth inequality, this isn't benign, right? In America, if you don't have wealth and if you don't have political support and political power, the $100,000 net worth of another group is used and weaponized to take and exploit your $1,700. Or actually, it's used to exploit your labor or your body, right? So, and this is how this works. I work at a university right now, and you see this all the time in university. There's a lot of money that's made studying black people at the University of Georgia. You study them, you study their ways, you study their mating habits, you study their education attainment, you divide them, study them by age, you do longitudinal studies. You have social workers that work with them. You have teachers and we're going to talk about, we have to talk about white teachers. That's going to be a whole show, and it's going to piss off a lot of really nice white women who think they're doing a good job. But I will say this as we do a primer into that show. Teach for America teachers, are you training black boys and girls for black self-determination and to claim black political power? Is that the education? Are you telling them about their claim? And if you're not doing that, then that's a problem. I'm just saying, we have a lot of white teachers teaching both white people and black people, but if they're not talking about giving the history, I just gave history over the last half hour, 20 minutes. I'm not making things up. That was an actual letter saying, please don't leave us, and then the federal troops left us. Like, those Klan pictures, that's not photoshopped. I mean, I put the date in there, but like, and then the picture of the Klan, of the 2017 planning meeting, that's not doctored. I didn't just like find white faces and put them in. No. The Klan wore hoods so that their kids don't have to. So the money that's in non-black communities is used and organized to weaponize to take and exploit black labor and what little black wealth and land there is. All right? And that's what we're contending against. And so that's why we need a black middle class to support a black community. And that's why we need a black political class, or a political class that cares about black politics, or cares about American politics, insofar as American politics includes a justice claim for black people, which it does. And we need curricular interventions, because if anything I've told you in the last half hour is new, that means we're not actually training the quality of citizenry that will get the quality of justice for black people. Like I said, I'm not looking for supremacy. I'm just looking for justice. And justice will only come once we can name terrorism, white terrorism, as a thing that exists today, as a thing that I have conversations every other day from people saying, well, you got to be cautious. You got to be cautious with what you do. You have to be careful. You know, you're talking like you're making white people nervous. You can't talk about white women like that. That's like, they're good people. They're trying to be teachers. You have to be very cautious. You have to be very, very cautious. You know who never hears that? The developer who's now building a $50 million condominium plan. Nobody ever tells Carlos Nichols to be cautious. Nobody ever tells West to be cautious. Nobody ever tells Donald Trump, well, you know, you have to worry about black people. You know, you have to be very cautious around them. No, that's what money gets you. That's what political power gets you. You don't have people saying you have to be cautious when in teaching history. I have to so that's the vulnerability of black political and economic life, and they're tied. We can't make claims, we can't contend claims, and that's a problem. So I need you to share this video. I should have told you this at the beginning. Go to your social media, share this video, and subscribe to this channel. Right? We can only build if we can grow. We can only get the quality of politics we need if we can grow. We're at like 4,000 subscribers right now. Let's make that number 10,000. And that'll mean you email this video out to your book club, email this out to your sewing circle, email this out to your church list. Go ahead. Because we're trying to build, we're trying to grow, and we're trying to do it through a black politics. And email this out, tell your friends, and post this on your social media, send it around Twitter, send it around on your Facebook. Because this is the quality of discourse we need. And now I'm going to open it up for questions, because one of the perks of having a live studio audience is that people get to speak. And I want to not only, like in classes, in my class, I encourage people to speak. And not only I encourage people to speak, I call on people. Look, I'm a PhD student at the University of Georgia. I taught 3 classes this morning. People say, like, don't call on quiet people because, they're introverted, so, like, putting them on the spot is rude. That's not where we are in America right now. You don't get to opt out. Because if you opt out of making your claim, you make your community food. You don't get to opt out. The idea that, like, I'm an introvert, I don't get to talk, I can't make a claim. No, because then what that ends up doing is distributing risk inappropriately. And you don't get to opt out, not if you're black. You don't get to opt out of making justice claims if you're white on behalf of black people. That's what an ally is. An ally is someone who advocates for this kind of history to be taught in public schools. Not just in black public schools, although it needs to be taught in black public schools. It also needs to be taught in white public schools, just so we have a citizenry that can adjudicate claims appropriately. Right? So before I call on people, I'm going to say, studio audience, please take the microphone. I also want to say that all of this is necessary. I mean, all of this is only possible because of the good work of an Athens resident who was born in Athens and has dedicated the last few years into growing Athens. His name is Broderick Flanagan. Put the camera, give me the other camera. Yeah.
Cut it out.
So let me tell you about Broderick as you look at him. Broderick Flanagan's a local artist. If you need a mural painted in Athens, and I think you travel.
The price is right.
If the price is right, Broderick does travel. If you need a mural painted in Athens or in the vicinities in the collar counties, please don't hesitate to just Google Flanagan Studios in Athens and contact the man. He has reasonable prices. He also, when he's not a wonderful artist, and he teaches in school, so if you want art lessons, this could all be negotiated at a very reasonable price, because I believe in paying black people. Go to Flanagan Studios and talk to Broderick, and he's the one who is pushing, who has pushed, and allows us to do this studio here to do this show here today. Also, if you look at your white organization and you think, you know what, we really should be using more black contractors. We really should be using more black locksmiths. We really should be using more black plumbers, more black contractors, more black floor cleaning, more black janitorial services. I know my daughter's wedding's coming up and we were going to go to one hairstylist, but like, if we're going to be throwing this kind of money around for bridesmaids, we should be doing it at a black one because we've been locking them out and terrorizing them for this long. Broderick also is a black and minority business consultant. So if you go to Flanagan Studios, contact him. He will contact you with the black business who can meet your needs and give that black business the money that is owed to them as a matter of being locked out of American economic life. So Broderick, give me a question. What's up?
Yes. First off, I want to thank you, man, for the enlightenment that you're giving us. You know, you're coming with a lot of different perspectives. I think perspectives that people need to hear. There's some things that people are, kind of bashful about saying in public. So I appreciate you for that. One thing I want to speak to real quickly is there's a process going on right now in Athens, with the comprehensive plan. So every 10 years, I think it's by law, every 10 years, they have to come up with a comprehensive plan for land use, as you were speaking to earlier. So right now, this is the first time that they've really, they don't have to involve the public as they did. But what happened was they created this steering committee or governing body or body to kind of guide a portion of the process, and we call it Envision Athens. So, what is your take on, how we as Black Athenians plug into that process or the comprehensive plan in itself? Can you speak to, I guess, going down to the planning department to start to make some of these demands for claims, or how does one show up and engage in that capacity?
Very good.
Yeah.
Good. Give me the camera, man. That's a very good question, Broderick. So the comprehensive plan is a statewide mandate. That means every city in the United States needs to come up with every city in Georgia, and I suspect not just Georgia, needs to come up with a comprehensive plan. This comprehensive plan should map out for the next 20 years, and it's going to be a plan about land use, right? And the primary people on this comprehensive plan committee right now is going to be the Planning Commission. They're going to make the final decision on what goes in the Planning Commission. And you better believe there's going to be an environmental requirement. There's going to be a green space requirement. The Planning Commission, I talked to one of the commissioners, and when they had this first meeting, they were so happy because, there are as many women as there are men in there. So, progress. The problem is, first of all, none of those women are Black, and 30% of the town is. So if they had a hard time finding Black women, I know quite a few, they could have asked. They just were not interested. So as a matter of governance, we need to make sure that Black people are at the table when the decision is made. And there are schemes to solicit input from the community without actually giving community power. And I feel like Envision Athens is one of them, right? So these schemes often run through nonprofits or not directly accountable or without direct decision-making power are where we ghettoize Black concerns, right? And right now there's an anti-discrimination task force that doesn't actually have any authority. And it was made that way. We wanted a task force that was publicly accountable and a part of government, but that was denied. And instead, we have an anti-discrimination task force that's it's got a lot of Black people on it, but they don't have any power. You know who does have power? These people have power. So you have to watch how Black concerns are managed and ghettoized to groups that don't have any named power. Right? So this Envision Athens project, which is supposed to solicit input from the community at large, doesn't actually have any power at the final, when the decisions are made. I participated in Envision Athens. All I did was talk about Black poverty, and I did so well and unambiguously. All I did is talk about the need for a plan that includes how we're going to mainstream 30% of the jobs that are created in Athens to be Black people. That did not make it past my little meeting, I suspect. And that's all I talked about. The Envision Athens is Black management, is community management, while community power goes through this planning commission and then the comprehensive planning commission, which is that commission plus a few other commissioners. So we're gonna go to more audience questions. Yes.
Can you say what you think the Freedmen's Bureau would have done right? And maybe contrast that with how the commission or the current model of economic development in Athens might be doing it wrong?
Okay, sure. All right, so the Freedmen's Bureau was a Union garrison.
I don't know what that means.
That means it was federal troops with guns, federal people with guns. Kelly, you gonna ask a question? All right, so it was federal people with guns making sure Black people got their justice and had the force of law. Thanks for coming, guys. Making sure Black people got their justice. That's a difference. They had the authority of the government. That's the difference between that and even a Supreme Court ruling. For example, Brown v. Board of Education. A Supreme Court ruling is great, but if you don't have the guns or the money to back it, municipalities just ignore it. Athens didn't desegregate till last week. I think it was actually 1971 and the university in 1961, but a half generation ago. So people just ignore policies that aren't backed by either guns or money. And so the Freedmen's Bureau was backed by guns, and that matters, right? A nonprofit that says, please, please, please include black people. That's not backed with anything. That's just backed with like a white donor, honestly, because we saw the money discrepancy. That's just backed with like a donor's discretion. So that's what's at stake with having a government body that has access to guns handle your justice claim, and a nonprofit or a non-government entity handle your justice claim. Any other questions? Ma'am? Comments? Yes, no?
Hey.
What's up, man? Hey.
So I'm a teacher.
Good.
As I think you know. And first I want to, again, extend my appreciation for what you're doing.
Yeah.
I see these issues play out with the students that I work with a lot, and the issues that you're talking about, the educational component, the economic component. The educational component is critical because otherwise a deficit mindset starts to manifest within students, and that's devastating.
Right.
But in terms of the economic aspect, I see that this disparity, and I think that this is the same exact thing that you're saying, is that the disparity in income is not just created. Wealth was not just created by a terrorism that was originated in white supremacy, but that it's still maintained.
Right.
And as far as that, there's mechanisms in play that bias in favor of one group or against another
You
group.
still have black people who are scared. It's like at the end of the day, that anytime you have black people, black adults, or black kids, black adults who are scared, to be honest, in the face of white people, who are scared to contend white power, who are scared to say, like, Nancy, you're an awful mayor. We need a mayor that actually is dedicated to building a black middle class. Anytime you have a black politics that's scared to contend political power with white people, it's because of the legacy of terrorism.
Yes.
It's scared with cause. So it's not like, like the fear is real, and the fear is founded, and the fear needs to be like acknowledged and then redressed. But yeah.
My concern, though, that I'm wanting to get to here is that if there are systems in place that are still
Terrorizing black people. Yeah, good.
The ability to demand and state claims are neutered to a degree,
Right.
and that's a concern. And so I brainstorm ways that those interests could be aligned with potentially other interests to try to seek out the synergistic potential that is possible in that alignment.
Okay, good.
And so I'm just interested in your take on that.
So the problem is there aren't too many people who share the same fate as black people. In America, and the last 8 years of the show, like I said, maybe I'll do a different show on this. Everybody else's wealth grew or stayed the same, a little bit flat, except black people. So like a rising tide doesn't lift all ships. Sometimes a rising tide, like black boats stay the same, and then other people use their boats to ram black boats and like pirate black boats. A rising tide does not lift all boats necessarily. So trying to find a shared interest between recent immigrants and descendants of slaves, or descendants of slaves, black descendants of slaves, and like other groups, it's not an easy fit. We need to actually just acknowledge the black justice claim that emerges from terrorism as what it is. Like if you're a descendant of slave in America, you're owed justice. You're owed justice. You've been made poor so that other people can be made wealthy. You're owed justice. And like until we can teach the quality of history that will motivate that claim, then we're just giving our citizens a distorted view of reality. And this makes white citizens feel a little bit easier than they should, and it gets black citizens, and this is my problem, it gets black people blaming themselves. It gets black people blaming themselves for a legacy of terrorism. Like, no. You think the descendants of the people in those hoods blame themselves? As you think the people who shot Shirley Sherrod's father, their descendants blame themselves as they sit on their acres and acres of land? No. But black people are made to blame themselves because of that, the wealth inequality. And the fragility of black life when your net worth is $1,700 and the white power net worth is $100,000, you're food. The fragility of that life keeps people quiet. So now we don't even need people in hoods anymore. We just have an income inequality that's so great that, like, the idea like that black people just know they're going to have a white boss, so they can't, like, speak out and contend white power. That's what income inequality, that's what wealth inequality means. That's what the lack of black businesses mean. Or when even the black businesses, like, need to worry about white contracts and keeping white egos comfortable. Like, that's a problem. And like I said, I talk about black power not as a matter of black supremacy. I don't want supremacy. I just want black people to be able to contend their cut. I want black people to be able to contend their justice claims. I want black people in that room. Because black power, and I want them, honestly, let me put a picture of that room up. I want them in this room, and black power just means 3 people in this room. Don't tell me one person's progress. I want 3. I want 3 black people in that room, 2 black women and a black man in that room, making sure when that room carves up black neighborhoods like a Thanksgiving turkey, that it's done so with input from the community. And when I go and lobby that community, knowing that Athens is 30% black, I want to look over and lobby black people. Because there are lobbyists. The last time I was at a planning commission meeting, there were lobbyists there, and I'm going to put a picture of the lobbyists who weren't me. These were the lobbyists. These were all contractors looking to get their cut. These were all contractors looking to get their cut. And you know what they did? They got their cut. And that's a problem, I think, because I would also like black people to get 30% of their justice. So, are there any more questions from the audience? Good. All right. So what I'm going to tell you right now, this is going to be a show. I'm going to do shows. I want a live studio audience. We're going to grow. We're going to tell people. We're going to tell friends. We're going to grow black politics. And the aim is always going to be put money in black people's pockets, build a black middle class. And that's like moving black people from poverty wages, because everyone works, to non-poverty wages. I want black people walking in at $50,000 a year, $40,000 a year. I want black construction workers. And I want a pipeline to know that those construction workers are getting contracts. And I want the political power to force the developers to make sure that that black businesses are getting contracts. Because that's just what we deserve. Also, folded in with this project, I want to sit down, one-on-one and talk with the elder community. Because there are a lot of people in their 70s and 80s who've been in Athens for a long time, who's nobody put a camera on them and said, all right, tell me your story. I want 20 minutes a decade. Tell me about the 50s in Athens. And they just talk about the 50s. Tell me about the 60s in Athens. And they just talk about the 60s and just walk up the decades. And I want an archive of black Athenians before they pass, because there's a guy named Killian who I didn't get to before he passed, and I kicked myself, and that's not going to happen again in Athens. So I want an archive of black Athenian elders who just tell their stories into the camera. And honestly, in 10 years or 20 years, I want this to be the kind of thing that's paid for at their funeral. So that's the kind of work that's played at their funeral, just like they tell their life. And I want that to be an archive. So nobody can ever say that nobody can rewrite history, because it'll be them themselves telling about what happened and why it happened. So that's part of the project. And if you support that project, go over to thefunkyacademic.com, click over, later Mariah, click down, and all this costs money. And like I said, eventually I want a studio so that nobody can tell us what to do and how we can advocate for black people. That's going to cost a lot of money. So Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you for the audience. Thanks for coming out, guys. And we'll do it again the next time we can do it again. And peace.